The Young and the Restless spoilers Thurdays full December 18, 2025. The fallout from the Jabbat scandal continues to ripple outward, touching every corner of Genoa City. And what makes this phase of the story particularly volatile is that it is no longer confined to boardrooms or headline acid is seeping into personal relationships, exposing hidden motives, and forcing characters to reveal what they truly believe about power, loyalty, and control. Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra find themselves at the center of one of the most revealing conversations to date, not because either of them holds ultimate authority over the situation, but because both understand how narratives are built and destroyed in real time. When Billy lays out his perspective for Sally, he does so with a mix of bitterness and clarity that reflects years of watching Victor Newman operate. Billy insists that Adam Newman may believe he is running Newman Media, but in reality, Adam is performing exactly the role Victor designed for him, a visible operator masking an invisible master. From Billy's point of view, the Jabbat scandal isn't the product of independent journalism or even opportunistic reporting. It is a calculated assault engineered from the top, with Adam positioned just far enough forward to absorb blame if things turn ugly. Sally, however, doesn't immediately accept Billy's framing, and her hesitation matters because it reflects the broader public dilemma. She asks the question many viewers are already asking themselves: does Billy really believe Newman Media fabricated everything from scratch? Sally points out that there are, in fact, legitimate concerns surrounding Jabbat, and by doing so, she introduces the uncomfortable truth that Victor's strategy works best when it leans on fragments of reality. Billy doesn't deny that mistakes exist, but he draws a sharp distinction between imperfection and collapse. He insists that Jabbat is fundamentally stable, that the company's core is intact, and that what is happening now is not exposure but exaggeration, weaponized to create panic. Sally counters with a pragmatic instinct shaped by her own experiences in the industry, arguing that the perception of strength matters as much as strength itself, and that allowing Newman Media to dominate the narrative unchallenged is effectively surrender. Her proposal is straightforward: flood the space with positive coverage, push back hard, and disrupt Victor's momentum. Yet Billy resists, not because he lacks the desire to fight, but because he understands Victor's favorite trap. Defensive publicity, especially when it comes from insiders, can make a company look guilty, or worse, desperate. Billy worries that pushing too aggressively will only confirm the very suspicion Victor wants to cultivate, that the Abbotts are scrambling to protect their own interests. Sally's frustration grows because from her perspective, silence looks like weakness, and weakness is exactly what Newman Media is exploiting. The tension between them isn't personal, it's philosophical. Billy believes restraint is the smarter play because it denies Victor the spectacle he wants, while Sally believes restraint allows Victor to define reality uncontested. Neither is wrong, and that's what makes the conversation so unsettling. There is no clean solution, only varying degrees of risk. While Billy and Sally debate optics and power, the Abbott family itself is shifting into strategic mode behind closed doors. Jack Abbott, Diane Jenkins, and Carl Abbott come together not as a fractured family, but as a unit that understands survival requires coordination. Jack's posture in these moments is not that of a man flailing under pressure, but of someone who recognizes that Victor has chosen escalation and that hesitation will be interpreted as concession. Diane's involvement adds a layer of calculated calm, because she has always been acutely aware of how perception intersects with reality, especially when enemies are eager to rewrite history. Kyle, caught between legacy and modernity, feels the weight of proving that Jabbat is not an outdated institution crumbling under its own inertia, but a living enterprise capable of adaptation. Their planning is not loud or impulsive, it is deliberate, focused on minimizing damage while identifying where Victor has overextended. They understand that Victor's decision to unleash the scandal pressure during such a visible moment was meant to destabilize morale as much as finances, and so their strategy centers on containment, continuity, and unity. If the Abbotts fracture internally, Victor wins without having to lift another finger. If they present cohesion, even under fire, they deny him the satisfaction of watching panic spread organically. This is not just about saving Jabbat, it is about preserving the Abbott identity in a city where reputations are dismantled faster than balance sheets. Elsewhere, the emotional cost of the scandal becomes painfully clear through Daniel's growing concern for Summer Newman. Daniel's worry isn't abstract, It is personal, rooted in the knowledge that Summer is inevitably caught between two powerful legacies and that corporate warfare has a way of bleeding into private lives. Seeking answers, Daniel turns to Phyllis, asking directly whether she knows why Jabbat is suddenly taking losses. Phyllis responds with practiced ease, claiming ignorance, but the lie sits uneasily between them. Daniel knows his mother too well to accept that answer at face value. Years of surviving Phyllis's schemes have trained him to hear what she doesn't say as clearly as what she does. His suspicion sharpens when he recalls her behavior earlier in the evening, and he confronts her with a question that cuts closer to the truth than she is prepared to admit. Why was she probing Jack for information tonight? And why does she suddenly care so much about what's happening to Jabbat? Phyllis tries to redirect, insisting that her only concern is how the situation might affect Summer, framing her interest as maternal rather than strategic. But Daniel isn't convinced. He hears the deflection, senses the evasion, and recognizes the familiar pattern of Phyllis positioning herself just close enough to the truth to benefit without taking responsibility. Her irritation flares, not because Daniel is wrong, but because he is too close. Unable or unwilling to maintain the facade under scrutiny, Phyllis storms off, leaving Daniel behind with a conclusion he doesn't want to reach but can't ignore. His mother is hiding something, and whatever it is, it ties directly into the chaos surrounding Jabbat. That realization doesn't just deepen Daniel's mistrust, it reframes the scandal itself as something more intricate than a simple Newman versus Abbott skirmish. It suggests layers of manipulation still unseen, motives still concealed, and players who are pretending to be bystanders while quietly influencing outcomes. Chelsea Lawson, meanwhile, finds herself increasingly unsettled by the atmosphere surrounding the scandal, even if she can't immediately articulate why. Her discomfort isn't rooted in financial exposure or public scrutiny, it's emotional, intuitive. The sense that something is being orchestrated behind the scenes and that people she knows are being used as instruments rather than participants. Chelsea has lived long enough inside Victor's orbit to recognize the feeling of being collateral, and the way Newman media is being wielded triggers a familiar unease. She watches Adam's role with a mixture of concern and frustration, understanding that Adam's confidence in his autonomy may be the very thing Victor is exploiting. That awareness leaves Chelsea restless, because she knows how easily belief can turn into blindness, and how devastating the fallout can be when the illusion of control finally collapses. Taken together, these threads form a picture of a city on edge, where every conversation carries subtext and every denial invites suspicion. The Jabbat scandal is no longer just a corporate crisis, it is a catalyst exposing who trusts whom, who is lying to protect themselves, and who is willing to let others burn to achieve their goals. Billy and Sally's debate underscores the impossibility of fighting Victor on his chosen terrain without risking self-inflicted damage. Jack, Diane, and Kyle's strategy highlights the necessity of unity in the face of calculated destabilization. Daniel's confrontation with Phyllis reveals how deeply the scandal has penetrated family dynamics, turning concern into interrogation and love into doubt. And Chelsea's discomfort serves as a quiet warning that the cost of Victor's maneuvers will not be confined to headlines or stock prices. As the narrative continues to unfold, the question is no longer whether Jabbat will survive this attack, but what relationships will be irrevocably altered in the process. And how many people will realize too late that the story they believed was only ever part of someone else's design. At the Abbott mansion, the atmosphere is heavy with the kind of tension that settles in only after the damage has already been done, and the scale of it is finally sinking in. Jack moves through the familiar rooms like a man carrying invisible weight on his shoulders, fully aware that this house has seen wars before but rarely one that feels quite this destabilizing. The speed of Victor's counterstrike is what rattles them most, not just because it was effective, but because it was immediate, almost anticipatory. Kyle voices the question that has been gnawing at everyone's nerves, asking how Victor could possibly have mobilized his operatives so quickly. How Newman media and the surrounding machinery seemed to activate as if it had been waiting for a signal. Jack's answer is brutally honest and stripped of comfort. He explains that he told only those he trusted without reservation, people he believed were solid, discreet, incapable of betrayal. There is no attempt to soften the implications, no effort to reassure for reassurance's sake. Jack looks at his wife and his son and admits what he has been trying not to say out loud, that this could very well be the end for them if they miscalculate again. It is not melodrama. It is the clear-eyed assessment of a man who understands how Victor Newman finishes fights once he believes he has the upper hand. Jack presses Diane and Carl for their thoughts, not because he expects easy answers, but because he knows that survival at this stage depends on collective analysis rather than solitary resolve. He insists that Victor will not stop here, that escalation is not a possibility but a certainty, and he frames the situation with chilling simplicity. There are only 3 questions left to answer: what Victor will do next, when he will do it, and where it will land. Everything else, Jack admits, is out of their control, and the most infuriating part is that Victor knows it. Victor understands exactly how constrained the Abbotts are by optics, by timing, by the need to appear stable while chaos swirls around them. That knowledge gives Victor a strategic patience that feels almost sadistic, because it allows him to strike precisely where defenses are weakest while forcing his opponents to wait, watch, and absorb the blow. After Kyle heads upstairs, needing distance from a conversation that feels too close to collapse, Billy arrives, bringing with him a different kind of energy, sharper and less restrained. Jack immediately fills him in, explaining that their priority now is identifying how Victor learned of their plan so quickly. Diane doesn't hesitate to introduce the possibility Jack clearly wants to avoid, suggesting that Nikki may have been the leak. Her tone isn't accusatory for the sake of drama, it's clinical, grounded in the understanding that proximity to Victor is itself a vulnerability. No matter how well-intentioned the person involved may be, Jack reacts instantly, rejecting the idea outright. He insists that Nikki would never betray him in that way, not intentionally, not even accidentally. But Diane pushes back, not because she enjoys provoking him, but because she refuses to let sentiment cloud strategy. In wars like this, she argues, truth is less important than probability, and Nikki's closeness to Victor makes her a variable that cannot be ignored. Jack's denial sharpens into something almost visceral. He raises his voice, not in anger at Diane so much as in defense of a conviction he refuses to relinquish. He says he knows, with absolute certainty, that Nikki did not tell Victor anything, that she would never hand Victor that kind of advantage, and that he would stake his trust on it without hesitation. The intensity of his response underscores how deeply personal this has become. Nikki is not just a name in the equation, she represents the last remaining line between rivalry and something uglier. Something that would confirm Victor's worldview that loyalty is always conditional and manipulable. Billy listens carefully and then steps in, grounding the conversation in pragmatism. He tells Jack that he trusts his judgment about Nikki, but he also makes it clear that the mechanism by which Victor obtained the information is no longer the most critical issue. What matters is that Victor has it, has acted on it, and will continue to do so unless something fundamentally changes. Billy's question is simple and direct: what can he do to help? It's not a grand gesture, it's an acknowledgement that this fight has reached a point where individual pride must give way to coordinated action. Jack's response is equally stark. He says that Victor cannot be allowed to continue running this narrative unchecked, that as long as Victor controls the program, the messaging, the flow of information, the Abbotts will always be reacting instead of shaping outcomes. Jack makes it clear that containment is no longer enough. They don't just need to blunt Victor's next move, they need to remove the threat entirely. This isn't about winning a round or forcing a temporary retreat. It's about dismantling the machinery Victor is using against them, stripping him of the ability to dictate terms, once and for all. The gravity of that declaration hangs in the room, because everyone understands what it implies. Taking the program away from Victor doesn't mean embarrassing him or scoring a symbolic victory. It means going after the infrastructure that supports his dominance, the systems he uses to project power and fear simultaneously. It means risk, exposure, and consequences that could reverberate far beyond Jabbit or Abbott communications. Jack isn't pretending otherwise. He knows that if they move forward with this mindset, there will be no easy exit and no guarantees of safety. But he also knows that allowing Victor to continue unchecked is a slower, more certain form of defeat. In that moment, Jack isn't just a CEO defending a company, he is a man who has finally accepted that coexistence with Victor Newman has reached its breaking point. As Billy absorbs this, it becomes clear that the Abbott mansion is no longer just a home or a refuge. It has become a war room, a place where decisions made in quiet rooms will shape public realities, where trust will be tested, alliances strained, and every assumption questioned. Victor's speed and precision have forced Jack into a corner, but they have also stripped away illusions. There is no longer any doubt about the nature of the enemy or the cost of hesitation. The next phase of this conflict will not be fought with half measures or polite restraint. It will be fought with intent, with clarity, and with the understanding that once they commit to removing Victor's grip on the narrative, there may be no turning back. The conversation at the Abbott mansion takes a decisive turn once Billy voices what everyone in the room has been circling without quite daring to say out loud. If Victor is weaponizing the artificial intelligence scandal, then the only way to truly neutralize him is to go straight to the origin of that technology. The person who took it before Victor ever had the chance to fully control it. The name lands heavily in the room, charged with history and risk. Phyllis. Jack doesn't hesitate to say it, but the weight behind the name is unmistakable. Phyllis Summers is not an abstract solution. She is volatility incarnate, someone whose loyalties shift with opportunity and survival. Jack's first instinct is skepticism, and it shows in the way he questions whether she would ever truly align herself with the Abbotts rather than play both sides for maximum leverage. Billy, however, understands Phyllis in a way few others do. He knows that her alliances are not built on sentiment but on advantage, and right now Victor holds too much of it. When Jack asks Billy directly whether he thinks Phyllis would come over to their side, it is less a question than a challenge, an acknowledgement that they are running out of clean options. Jack assigns Billy the task without ceremony: talk to her, feel her out, find out where her interests really lie. Diane, always focused on the mechanics of persuasion, immediately asks the more uncomfortable follow-up: what exactly are they prepared to offer her? Jack's answer is telling in its bluntness. At this point, almost anything. It is not desperation, it is realism. Jack understands that Phyllis will not move unless the reward outweighs the risk. And he also understands that the price of losing this war is far higher than whatever concession they might have to make to secure her cooperation. In that moment, Jack accepts a truth he has resisted for years: to beat Victor Newman, he may have to work with people he does not fully trust. Because Victor has never limited himself to honorable alliances. At the ranch, the consequences of Victor's strategy ripple through a different set of dynamics. Chelsea walks in expecting transparency and collaboration, only to be blindsided by Adam's announcement that sales have surged dramatically. The numbers might look impressive, but Chelsea's reaction is not celebratory. It is wounded and sharp, driven by the realization that she has been excluded from a decision that directly affects the company she helps represent. She demands to know why she wasn't informed in advance, why Adam couldn't spare even a moment to loop her in. Standing there, she is forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. She is out of the loop, and that exclusion doesn't just bruise her pride, it damages her credibility. From her perspective, it makes her look incompetent, uninformed, and secondary, not just internally but to anyone watching Newman Media closely. Chelsea voices what Adam seems unwilling to acknowledge: that this kind of unilateral action doesn't merely affect personal relationships. It undermines the company's image by creating the impression of disorganization and internal fracture. Adam, caught between loyalty to Victor and his own sense of autonomy, struggles to justify himself without admitting what Chelsea already suspects: that the decisions are no longer his to make in any meaningful way. Victor's entrance shifts the tone instantly. He doesn't bother with softening language or reassurance. He reminds Chelsea, with deliberate clarity, that he owns Newman Media and that both she and Adam work for him. The hierarchy is not up for debate. His question is not whether she understands, but whether she will stop questioning it. Victor makes it clear that he does not want doubt, not about his authority and not about his methods. Chelsea pushes back just enough to preserve her dignity, explaining that her frustration isn't rooted in rebellion but in being sidelined, in being treated as expendable rather than integral. Victor responds with a calculated blend of dismissal and condescension. He tells her that he values her as an employee, but then delivers the line that reveals the depth of his confidence: "A job is finished." In Victor's mind, the outcome is already decided. The company is no longer a rival but a relic, and his tone suggests that anyone still worrying about appearances or balance simply hasn't accepted reality yet. Chelsea is left standing in the uncomfortable space between being valued and being irrelevant, realizing that in Victor's world, appreciation does not equate to influence. The true collision, however, comes later, after Adam and Chelsea have left, when Phyllis arrives. Her anger is immediate and unfiltered, the kind that comes from recognizing betrayal before it has even been fully articulated. She confronts Victor with the core of their agreement, reminding him that this was never the plan. She gave him the artificial intelligence program with a clear understanding of what she would receive in return. Jabot. Not influence, not promises, not future considerations, but control. As she speaks, it becomes painfully obvious that she has already connected the dots. Victor no longer needs the program the way he once did. He has leveraged it, amplified its impact, and now stands in a position where her bargaining chip feels suddenly disposable. Victor, as always, responds with calm assurance rather than defensiveness. He tells her she will receive what he promised, that his word still stands. But to Phyllis, the words ring hollow, because she understands Victor's favorite tactic better than most. He rarely breaks his word outright. He reshapes it until it no longer resembles what was originally agreed upon. Phyllis challenges him directly, asking whether he is reneging on their deal, whether he has been using her all along as a means to an end. The question hangs in the air, heavy with years of shared history, manipulation, and mutual exploitation. Victor does not answer the question the way Phyllis wants him to. He never does. Admission is not part of his arsenal. To confess deception would be to concede moral ground, and Victor Newman does not concede ground unless forced. Instead, he lets ambiguity do the work for him, allowing Phyllis to stew in uncertainty, to question whether she has already lost the advantage she believed she held. What Phyllis doesn't yet fully articulate, but instinctively senses, is that Victor's confidence is no longer dependent on her cooperation. That realization is what makes her dangerous again. If she concludes that Victor has outgrown his need for her, then her loyalty becomes not just negotiable, but unnecessary. And that is the moment the Abbots are waiting for, whether they realize it yet or not. Because if Phyllis believes Victor has played her, then she will look for a new leverage point, a new alliance, a new way to tilt the board back in her favor. The question is no longer whether Victor will admit betrayal won't, but whether Phyllis will decide that exposing him is more profitable than trusting him. And in a city built on shifting loyalties and carefully timed revenge, that decision could be the one that finally turns the tide.